We've got Francine Marques, who will be talking to us about mentoring and building your CV. I'm sure all of you are very excited to hear what she has to say, and I'll just let Francine take it away.
All right, thank you, Hamdi. Hamdi is one of my PhD students, by the way. I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me to talk today, and I feel really honored to be able to give back a little bit to our community. So before I talk about building your CV, I wanted to talk about 5 other things that I think are really important before you even consider your CV. The first one is that you really need to know what success looks like to you, because that will be something that is different to me, is different like to Hamdi, different to every single person. And you need to know that quite clearly in your head. Also knowing your values and your mission is really important, because those should be those things should be driving where you're heading. You can't just do a research or even like work in a team that you don't feel your values are being fulfilled. You're not going to be happy. And also the third thing is be kind to others, but also to yourself. Everybody has bad days, and nobody is perfect, so people make mistakes along the way. I always like to take the approach that people don't do that in purpose, but we know a few, but the majority of people don't. And I think it's important that we recognize that, and we are more forgiving than judgmental. And what is leading then to the 4th point is make sure you're having fun and you're also happy in real life, not just on Twitter, on Instagram. And I hope you can have more good days than bad days. And if you're having a bad day, just acknowledge that, see what you can do to change it, see if there's anything that you can do that perhaps aligns better with your values, and you can try to live a happier life. And the 5th thing is Japanese term that I'll try to say, but clearly I'm not Japanese. It's called ganbatte, and it means do your best, go for it, and don't give up. I like to use that instead of using just good luck, because good luck seems that it's just whether you're lucky or not to get your dream job, to publish a paper, or to do anything that you want to achieve in your career. Well, these acknowledge your contribution. And I think it's also important, especially in difficult times like this, that we all acknowledge that we're doing the best we can in the circumstances we have. And I'm sure like you're all going through difficulties at the moment. We all are, but don't put yourself down, because we're all doing the best we can at the moment. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you is then building your resume. So there's several things that we need to take into consideration. And one is that a CV is always going to be career specific and also specific to what you consider success. So my advice is going to be for science, and also based on my experience sitting in fellowship panels. So the first advice is to develop a vision of where you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years, and check how to get there. So for example, check guidelines for a fellowship, or a structure of paper and types of papers that are published if you're targeting a certain journal. A lot of these things, they don't happen overnight. You won't be able to produce an enormous amount of data for a high impact factor paper, if that's what you're going for, or be successful in applying a fellowship if you're not preparing for that for a while. The second advice is it's okay to ask for help, and help from your peers, from your supervisors, from your mentors as well. So mentorship is something that I'll speak a little bit more later, but it's really, really a really good opportunity to try to develop a lot of your CV, and your mentors can help you to identify skills that you need to develop. They can introduce you to people. They can give you advice in terms of your career in general. So it's okay to ask for help from a lot of different people, including from your mentors. And also it's okay to have more than one mentor. you don't need just to have one. I think there's a lot of talks these days about diversity in science and how that improves science. And I think we can relate to that in mentorship as well. It's okay to have more than one mentor. They'll give you different perspectives and they'll help you in different ways. I have at least, I would say 5 formal mentors, but there are other people that step in at different stages that have acted as a mentor as well, and I have benefited like highly from having that. My third advice is then to have contributions that feel organic, they're genuine, and they're authentic. One of the things, for example, is working in committees. Although that looks like a tick in your CV, I would just make sure that like when you volunteer to work in a committee, you're doing that for the right reasons, because you really want to help that organization, because you really believe in the work that they're doing, because you really want to change something. Don't just sit in a committee just to tick a box, because you want people to want to work with you. And if people feel you're not contributing, you're not replying to emails, you're not really coming up with ideas, helping them to solve problems, drive, you're also going to develop a poor reputation. And our field is quite small in Australia, internationally as well. And you want to be recognized as someone that people want to work with. This is going to be really important as well as you advance your career. If you want to become one day a lab head, you want your team to come to work and be happy. That they're happy that they're working with you, happy that they're working with each other, and they know where you're going. So that's why the vision also is really important. As Hamdi and some of my other team members that I can see here too can attest, I spend a considerable amount of time trying to make sure that people are happy these days, because I really believe that this is really important for our team to be able to work together and be productive. My fourth advice is no matter how smart you are, if you don't work hard, you never make it in science. Unfortunately, it is a tough job, as many others are. And I'm sure the majority of people here are high achievers. Otherwise, you wouldn't be studying, you wouldn't many doing a PhD. And but don't just work hard. Be smart when you're working. Have confidence in what you're doing, and do it with the right people. So having imposter syndrome is very common in science. I have that all the time. I'm still wondering why you invited me to talk. And yeah, so just make sure that like you know that you will have to work hard, but be careful not to burn out, and make sure that you ask for help you need, that you collaborate with the right people, you work with the right people, and you're going towards the vision that you have. And that's why like having the vision is so important again. And my fifth advice is about networking. Science these days is not just about scientific contribution, but it is about also who you know, not so much in terms of like getting a position because you know someone, but it's about people remembering sometimes your name, saying, oh, I have seen her talk. She speaks really well. She's doing really interesting work. We could invite her to give a talk in our conference. Or yes, this person is working really hard. Like I would, like if you have a position to chair a session, I would like to put a name forward. So it is important that we have that network, that people get familiar with us. And as I mentioned again, it is about how people perceive the work you are doing and the way you behave with your colleagues. In terms of building your resume itself, as I said, I'll talk about science because that's what I know. And I'll share just this one slide with you because I put the High Blood Pressure Council right in the middle. And the reason that I wanted to share with you is because I try to work on this as a triangle. And the first thing that you need to really focus on should be the foundation, so it's in the bottom, for your CV would be papers. So unfortunately, I still believe we need numbers. You need to show leadership, but you also need quality. I would suggest that you try to aim about 50% to have like first or last of the papers you advance your career, and the other 50% work on co-authorship in terms of collaborations, student co-supervision, and also peer contribution. So even within your own labs, for example, you can help to build a culture where people work together. And through this, you can increase your scientific output, for example. But make sure that you still allocate enough time for your own research, because in the end of the day, you do need to be shown to be driving this research too. The second arm that I think we need to develop in for CV is a national and international recognition. And that will include presentations. Of course, invited presentations are great, but I know that these usually start appearing much later in your career. But again, having sponsors, having mentors that act as sponsors, they can really help with those invited talks. But also selected from abstracts. So when you write an abstract to a conference, that gets ranked. And depending on the ranking, you're invited to give a talk or to present a poster. And getting posters are great as well. That's not a bad thing. But I like to think that we pay a lot of attention in writing the abstracts in a way that anyone outside our immediate field can understand, that they flow well, they tell a story. And these, I find, they are very helpful when you're getting your abstracts scored. If people can much easier make sure that they understand the novelty, they understand why that's important, and they also understand in general what you're trying to achieve in your results. And also awards and grants are important, of course. And the only way to get them is unfortunately with experience. So getting practicing writing your applications and also applying. So apply to many. Don't be afraid of already submitted a few awards and applications and I didn't get any. Just keep going. Like I remember that through my PhD, I didn't get anything until my last year of my PhD, and that was really important for me to then be able to be successful to get a fellowship. So just keep applying, and eventually you get them. And the third pillar of building your resume will be a service to discipline. So this comes in different forms, such as sitting in committees. So as I mentioned, sitting committees where you're passionate about something, you want to drive something. It is really good, I think, these days when you're in a committee and you can take ownership over something. So you can say, my contribution to the committee was this, I managed this part of this activity, this part, I chaired a session, I managed the online chats, I started a new program, I started a new award. You can take ownership over these things. They're very helpful when people are reading your applications. And also, as I mentioned, they're really, really important to build reputation. And they will show also your leadership. We also need to consider them peer review. So this will come in forms of sitting in funding body grant review panels, and also peer reviewing for journals. So for ECRs, you can start volunteering to sit in grant review panels. There are several bodies like the Heart Foundation, the NHMRC, and there will be some others as well for smaller like councils and societies that you can also contribute to. We do invite some ECRs also to review the abstracts for the high blood pressure meeting every year. And for journals, what you can do is until like you start publishing a few papers and you get your name out there, it is hard to get these invitations. But I'm highly suggestive of like PhD students learning how to do this. I think this is really important for their own understanding of the limitations of their work and how they write. So for example, in our lab, we do journal clubs every fortnight, and like especially very busy writing periods, like for us, like writing grants right now. If I receive invitations, I'll pass them on to my team as well. So I'll say, I can't, but here's a mail of a fantastic person that can do that. And if you're interested in peer reviewing, that's something that you can tell your supervisor that you're interested in doing. And the last one will be then public engagement. This is something that I think wasn't recognized much like 10 years ago, but it is like an increasing importance, both in terms of talking to media, so traditional and digital media, participating in social media such as Twitter. I actually met amazing people on Twitter. That could be a whole other talk that I'm sure there'll be other people more qualified to talk. And also speaking to the public. I received funding from the NHMRC and the Heart Foundation. These are taxpayers' money or just donors. And I think it would be unethical for me not to give back to them and actually make an effort to talk to them. So talking to the public about what you do, why you do, why is that important, that's actually like really, really valuable skill, but also really important for our community. We know from the Australian Cardiovascular Alliance that there is this misconception around cardiovascular disease, that it's either self-inflicted disease or all the problems are solved. And the more we can engage with the public and talk to them that that's not the case, that's really going to be beneficial for all of us in having long careers in science. So in terms of mentoring, I just wanted to talk to you a couple of things. Sorry, just keep this on. So mentoring is really, really important because your mentor, as I said, they can act as a sponsor and say, oh, this person is doing a really good job. They would be great to give a talk or to chair a session. They can give you advice of how to deal with a specific case. Like, for example, if you have an issue with your supervisor or you want to talk to your supervisor about something, but you don't know how to approach your supervisor, your mentor can help, and it's all confidential, of course. Your mentor can also help you to identify your transferable skills if you want to get out of science, can help identify what skills you might need to develop if you want a certain job or career path, and so on. So I strongly believe we need mentors outside our immediate supervisory team, because even though I wish the best for my team, I know that I still have the bias that I still expect them to be doing a certain like type of work, while the mentors won't have that expectation and that unconscious bias. And there's a lot of opportunities now for mentoring. So the High Blood Pressure Council has mentors. Our community is really amazing. We have fantastic people that are usually very happy to donate their time for mentoring. We also have through the International Society of Hypertension mentoring opportunities. So you can be linked with like a mentor in the US, in South America, in Europe, in Asia, in anywhere in the world. And we also have now through the Australian Cardiovascular Alliance a cross-sector mentoring. So you can specifically request, for example, being a lab-based scientist like myself, I could request to be linked with someone from the industry or a clinician or someone that will give you a completely different perspective on the type of research you're doing as well. So I think those are really important and beneficial contributions. So just what I would like for you is to think about whether you have mentors. Do you have any formal mentors? Is there anyone that you actually go to talk to? And yeah, and I think that was all from me. So yeah, so make sure you engage with the mentoring schemes that are existing. They're great. You can contact Jane and the rest of the ACR team for the high blood pressure one. Otherwise, have a look for the International Society and the ACVA. We just launched those ones. We also have for the International Society some mentoring podcasts if you want to hear me talk more. But I interviewed two amazing people so far. You probably know Rianne Towers. She was the first female president of the society in over, I think like 50 years that the society has been there. And I also interviewed Professor Stephen Harrop, who was a former president of the High Blood Pressure Council and also of the International Society as well. And they're amazing, very generous, very nice people. Like, I highly recommend that you listen to those. And in terms of also not just building your CV, but building your leadership skills, I'll show you, I love this book. My team is sick of hearing about it. So from Brené Brown, Dare to Lead, and also her podcasts are really good. And another book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from Stephen Covey. It's a classic, has been around for 30 years, and I don't think it has changed much. That's it from me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much for that insightful chat, Francine. So I might start off with one of my questions and then move on to some of the questions from the audience. So you talked about all of these key things for building your CV, and you also mentioned that you have reviewed multiple CVs through some of the committees that you sit on. Can you tell us what is a key sort of like a very key specific aspect that you look for in the CVs, the standout CVs? Like, what do they all have in common?
For fellowship applications?
Yes.
Yes. For fellowship applications, you see the trajectory. So you see that someone is really like on the up and going, that they're increasing the number of papers, that they are engaging more with the community, they are having more talks. You see that they are in that upwards trajectory, but also you see evidence of leadership. I think that's really important. And the fellowships are so competitive these days that making sure that people that are getting these fellowships, they're people that are doing a lot in our field. So you can clearly see like the leadership side as well.
Yeah. So we have Rachel asking where we can find the podcast on mentoring that you've recorded.
They are on the Spotify and on the Apple podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. And what?
Look for International Society of Hypertension.
Okay, fantastic. And from Rakesh, we have a question regarding how much does the impact of a paper actually matter?
Yeah, that's a tough one. As I said, I still think, based on what I have seen in the fellowship panels, that you still need the impact, but you need the numbers, and you have to balance it out. So not every single paper is going to be a high impact factor paper, and that's the reality for the majority of researchers. There might be a few out there that might be able to say otherwise, but that's definitely not my case. I have a few big papers, and I have then like several smaller impact factor papers that I'm still very proud of, and some that I think that are like my best papers didn't get published anywhere near where I thought it deserved to go. So I also don't think that, like, because it didn't get published in Nature or whatever else like your standard is, don't think that that's less valuable in terms of research, or that you have achieved less because you haven't.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Michael would like to know how you recommend actually finding these mentors, especially those outside of your field.
Yeah, so through these mentoring programs that I mentioned, it is usually us that link you with a mentor, unless you have someone in mind. We allow people to say, I would like this person in particular, but that's not always the case, and you might not be familiar with the field. And in this case, like either the committee can try to make a decision based on questions about what you actually want to achieve out of the mentoring. I think managing expectations is really important. So matching you with someone that has a similar type of expectations of what you want to get out of the mentoring. But also you can talk to your supervisor, and basically then we can try to help you find a mentor.
Yep, so just to reiterate, the High Blood Pressure Council has a mentoring scheme, and Dean has kindly put on the application for that. So anyone that's interested in finding a mentor, please go ahead and click on the link, and that will take you to a form, and we'll be in contact with you shortly. So does anyone else have any more questions? Otherwise, I will keep going. Okay, so this is slightly a different question. What do you think is actually the most rewarding part of being a mentor? And sort of following on from that, at what point in your research career did you think that you were equipped enough to become a mentor? Like, for the early career researchers, at what point should we be mentoring?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I don't know if I ever had a moment, that I clicked and said, oh, now I feel I'm ready. I think a lot of the first interactions, they just were organic. They didn't happen, that someone actually, I volunteered to be a mentor specifically. Someone approached me and said, oh, I was looking for a mentor, I was wondering whether you're my mentor, which I really appreciated. But I think you can be a mentor in any stage. Like think about if you're a third year PhD student, you can mentor a first year PhD student. You have gone through a lot of the struggles that they are going through as well. Or even like mentoring an honors student. Like I have one undergrad student that approached me to be a mentor. So why someone that is doing an honors or PhD couldn't also mentor an honors student? Like there's always something that people are going to learn. And of course, like as you advance your career, you learn from experience, from your own experience, but also then from seeing others. But that doesn't mean that your experience is not valuable and someone is not going to benefit from it. So you can be a mentor at any time. And for the International Society and the ACVA, we also accept nominations to be a mentor. So if you want to be a mentor, you can also fill in the forms and and we can go from there and match you with someone.
Yeah, so this question comes from Ash, and he asks, so his question is related to networking and publication for ECRs. It's not always easy to keep collaborations, as many people, as it is based on common goals, and he works in a pretty niche area and finds it difficult to stretch collaborations. Do you have any comments or suggestions for anyone that might be in this situation?
Yeah. Oh, even if you work on something that is very specific, I'm sure you have a lot of transferable skills that might help other people. So collaboration doesn't need necessarily to be a major, like you go into the lab and actually running an experiment for someone, but it could be, for example, in advice in how to do something, or like feedback on an experimental design because you're an expert in that area. I don't think that like it's necessary, like there are other ways to expand your collaboration as well, but that's something that like you might need to look into case by case and see ways of doing that. So you might have seen a paper that Rachel and I wrote in Circulation a few weeks ago about what people can be doing, especially early and mid-career researchers can be doing during COVID-19 that we are working from home. And one of the things that we proposed was perhaps creating like a collaboration board where people could just post what they need help with that they don't know how to do. And we could try to create collaborations through that. If there was such a thing, I don't think that might be something useful for us to do in our community to increase collaborations as well. But Ash, I'm sure you have lots of good skills that a lot of people would benefit from. So don't think that because it's like you think it's a narrow field that you're working on, that's actually not valuable. It would be for a lot of people.
Yep, and this might be our final question for today. Do you think it is imperative to gain experience outside of the lab you complete your PhD in? For example, doing an international postdoc? And this question comes from Martin.
That's a very good question. I like looking at some of the people that have done really well in our field. I would say that that's beneficial, but I haven't done the international experience, because for me, Australia is my international experience, clearly, if you haven't noticed my accent. And so I think it is still valuable because of collaborations and like a longer term collaborations and links that you may establish. But I don't think it's imperative that you actually go and work somewhere else. And I think you can build a fantastic CV working in Australia. I think we do great research. And I think that the main difficulty is separating what is your research from what is your supervisor's research. And I know that that's a struggle for a lot of us. Even to show when you're applying for fellowships that what you're driving is actually yours and not someone else's. I had incidents where the work that I was driving was published with me as first author, but co-corresponding author. And my former supervisor got an invitation to talk at a prestigious conference about my work. And then like he was very nice and I ended up going and talking, but I know that like this is an issue for many, and perhaps that would be the most difficult part, but not necessarily having to do the international postdoc.
All right, thank you so much, Francine. That was a great chat. So unless anyone has any more questions, that will be the end of today's session. Please join us next week as we'll have Professor Alta Schultz, who will give us an update on the activities of the International Society of Hypertension and ways that we can engage with the society. But with that, we'll close the meeting for today.
Thank you. Thanks again, guys.